Okay, so happy spring, everybody. I'm delighted to see you all here today. We've been trying for a while to organize this event, so it's really great that it's finally happening. We will be recording this session, as I just said, so if you don't want to be on camera, you can definitely turn your camera off now. Today, we're going to talk about the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and we are honored to have as our guests 3 of the 8 delegates representing Democrats abroad on that body. As the representatives of DA, that means they represent all of us and the special conditions that we as Americans abroad deal with. I think that Americans overseas often fall into the trap of believing that other than voting for the president and their members of Congress every 4 years, they don't have any way of making their voices heard. But that's actually not true, at least not for those of us citizens of the world who belong to Democrats abroad. We do have a voice through the DNC. And today, Martha, Art, and Katie are here to talk to us and explain how that works. Martha McDevitt-Pugh has been a DNC representative since 2016. She's a member of the executive board of the DNC's LGBTQ caucus. She's also the founding chair of the DA Global LGBTQ caucus. She has served as chair of DA Netherlands and has held various other local and global roles. Art Schankler is a DNC rep and the current global vice chair of Democrats Abroad. He lives in Serbia and votes in New York. Katie Solon is a past global chair of DA and a current DNC member representing Democrats Abroad. She serves on the DNC's Western Caucus Executive Committee. She's also DA's Global Get Out the JOTV coordinator for the Americas, and she's the Arizona state team co-lead. As I said earlier, this is not her first rodeo, as she has been a guest on La Lucha once before. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Martha, who has some slides to share, and to Art and Katie. And I hope there'll be plenty of time at the end for all of your questions. If you want to ask a question, please type * hand up in the chat box.
All right. Thanks so much, Annie. And thanks so much for organizing this. I love the La Lucha events and I attend them on a regular basis. So I think that it's really terrific to be able to have a chance to join today. And yeah, I'd love to come to activities that are done by Democrats abroad in Spain. You guys have a fantastic country committee. So I really like the idea of just hanging out here together and have that opportunity to really answer questions and talk about what the DNC is. We do these sessions on a regular basis, and some of them can be found on the wiki, the recordings from past events. But it's also just really nice to talk through with a smaller group and interact and answer questions. So I want to talk today a little bit about kind of what the DNC is for those of you who might have questions about it. But I also really want to share some of my experiences with the DNC, because at my very first DNC meeting, I was not any kind of a DA leader. I just went as a member of the public. And it's really important for me that all of you know that that the DNC is an open organization where people can come and they can bring their issues. Anyway, let's just start with the slides and I'll walk through them. Annie, if you could go to the next one, that would be great.
How do I make it go to the next slide? Sorry.
Page down.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So what is the Democratic National Committee? It's the governing body of the United States Democratic Party. I always say the DNC means different things, right? It is the formal name of the Democratic Party. It's also the governing body. People refer to the building where the DNC is headquartered in Washington, D.C. as also the DNC, but formally it's the governing body of the Democratic Party. Next slide.
That it changed, right?
It did. No, it didn't yet. Oh, yes, it did. Sorry. So a couple of slides on what the Democratic National Committee does. It coordinates strategy to support Democratic candidates throughout the country and at local, state, and national office. So that's one of the functions of the party. Next slide. And we'll all be familiar with this. The DNC organizes the Democratic National Convention every 4 years, where we nominate a candidate for president of the United States and formulate the party platform. So this is where we start to see DA's role in the DNC. We're obviously also involved in that process. Next slide. And the DNC also provides support for party candidates. An important thing to note here is it doesn't have direct authority over elected officials. The DNC and other officers are elected by DNC members, and those elections have different characters depending on what kind of a phase we're in. We've also seen a lot of change in the DNC in recent years. It's become a more open party. We had a very open, competitive race for the DNC Executive Committee in 2017, which Art and Katie and I were all part of. And we actually interviewed everybody who's running for anything and created relationships with all those folks. And that was at a time where we had obviously just, lost the presidency and were not in power in any of the houses of Congress. It was a very open situation. So we, as DNC members, elected the full executive committee. It's a little bit different when there's a Democratic president in the White House who will put forward their own candidate. So it varies from time to time, but that is one of the roles of the elected members of the DNC. So we have a vote in that. And Elizabeth, I'm going to get to that in a minute. Elizabeth asked how many members are there in the DNC. There are over 400 members. I don't have the exact number. I think it's something like 450 members of the DNC.
Yep, something like that. Very close.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and let me just take that also a little bit further. So the members of the DNC are geographically representative. So we have the 57 state parties. We have 50 states. We have Democrats abroad. We have Washington D.C. We have the territories. And those members are locally elected. So there's a geographic distribution in the DNC membership. There are also 75 appointed members that are appointed by the chair. And when there's a Democratic president, it's often the president that is proposing those people. So there's a democratically elected part and there's an appointed part, which is ratified by us as a Democratic National Committee representatives. Those appointed positions serve several functions. One of them is to bring more diversity into the DNC. So you can imagine that a geographic process that's done by the local state parties may or may not result in a very diverse body. So sometimes there's some corrections that are done there to bring in representation from communities that are important inside the Democratic Party and in the American electorate. It's also used to bring in people who have special skills and who are going to play an important part in running committees. So that is up to the chair and to the president who is going to put forward those individuals. So that's worth noting as well. Next slide. The committees. So just like Democrats abroad, just like our DPCA, the DNC has several committees, an executive committee, which is a standing committee, budget and finance and credentials. And those are committees that meet twice a year like the rest of us, but they also meet in between as needed. So those are committees that are really governing the party. There's also a resolutions committee, just like we have, rules and bylaws committee. And then related to the convention, there are also specific committees that are set up for the platform, for credentials, for rules and bylaws and so forth, which are cyclical. So those are some of the main committees, which is actually where a lot of the power lies in the DNC is with those committees. Next slide. So Democrats abroad at the DNC. We have 8 DNC members, which we elect. Our chair and vice chair are ex officio members of the DNC. And then we elect 3 global representatives as well as representatives from each of our 3 regions. What's a little unique about Democrats abroad's DNC members is that we have half a vote. And a little bit of the history here, which you can read on the slide. It had to do with where Democrats abroad came from. It was merged with the Democratic Party of the Canal Zone and so forth. What's important about us having 8 DNC members is when we go to DNC meetings twice a year, we have many, many, many people to meet. We have 50 different state parties, and we are going to be helping all of those states get out the vote and win elections. So we need to be all over the place. We need to be connecting with as many states as possible, finding ways that we can support elections in those different areas. And if we had full votes and there were 4 of us, obviously we wouldn't be able to be in as many places as once. So it's very handy for us to have 8 DNC members in order to be able to cover all the territory that we need to cover. We're a little different in that way from other states, which have a geography inside the United States. So that's about our 8 DNC members. So what do we do as Democratic National Committee members? So we're there representing Democrats abroad. We're the only ones that are bringing up issues that are really of importance to Americans abroad. So we can tell our stories and discuss those and bring those into different forums. And as I mentioned already, we can also make sure that the different states know that we're bringing votes into their states. We can make connections. We can help connect with different state parties in terms of bringing speakers and candidates to Democrats abroad. So that's always really important, quite busy when we're at those meetings. Other thing we do at the Democratic National Committee meetings is we attend regional caucus meetings. So the DNC is divided into 4 different regions: the East, the South, the West, and the Midwest. And so as 8 DNC representatives, there's 2 of us in each of those different regions. So we attend those regional caucus meetings. And Katie and I, for example, are both members of the Western Caucus. So we're able to really deepen those relationships with the Western states, which is very helpful for us as we do our GOTV into all those states. Next slide. So our meetings are held twice a year. The DNC meetings are in the winter and the summer. The summer meeting is sometimes in the fall, but the winter meeting is usually in the winter. It's sometimes in Washington, D.C. Often in the winter, the meeting we're in Washington, D.C. And the other meeting, the summer meeting, this year it'll be in October in St. Louis, is held somewhere around the country. So another state will be hosting that. And that we've had meetings all over the place. We've had meetings in Chicago. We've had them in Las Vegas. That's always also gives us an opportunity to really connect with local state parties. So we attend those meetings twice a year. They are in-person meetings. They have some digital components more and more. And during the pandemic, we weren't having full meetings. So we were having just very short online meetings to conduct some business. But they are in-person meetings. There will often be phone meetings in between, and we had one just last week. We had an update meeting from Chair Harrison about important matters that are going on right now, such as the Wisconsin judicial elections, such as the impending court case in Texas around mifepristone, the abortion medication, and so forth, so that we get information pushed out to us. Also an update on voter protection activities. Last week, we had an update about how important it is to get started now for 2024 and make sure that we have voter protection in place. So those are phone meetings that happen from time to time. And then some of the regions, and maybe Art or Katie have more experience with this, some of the DNC regions will actually sometimes host their own regional get-togethers. I know since I've been on the Western Caucus, there was one in-person meeting that was held in between meetings. I wasn't able to go to it, unfortunately, but we try to get somebody there whenever there's a local meeting like that. So that's another opportunity to connect in the US in one of the regions. So those are things that we do. Next slide. What else? We vote on the party platform. We vote on rules and bylaws. We're also able to submit resolutions to the DNC. And if people are interested, we could talk more about resolutions. That's a whole topic on its own. And we elect the national party officers, which I also mentioned. So there will always be in a DNC meeting, it's usually held over about 2.5 days. And we'll have a couple of very busy days with a lot of parallel sessions of different caucuses and constituency groups, councils that'll take place. And we try to divide ourselves up over all of those. And then there'll be a business meeting where we'll have speakers. Part of the point of coming together at the DNC is really to bring back inspiration, to hear speakers who are talking about the issues that are at stake and to meet inspiring candidates. So that'll often be part of the business meetings. We'll have special guests. In Maryland, for example, last September, before the November elections, we had some of the candidates that were running for state office. The now governor attended one of the meetings, so we have a chance to meet leaders in the party as well. And then in the business meetings, we'll vote on resolutions and other matters. So that will happen in the general meeting, usually on the last day. Next slide. Is there a next slide? Yeah, so caucus meetings. So there are a number of constituency caucuses that are listed here: Black, Hispanic, LGBT, Women's, and Native American are all caucuses. Caucuses are defined based on there being a certain percentage of DNC members that belong to that constituency group, people who have the immutable characteristics. That's how caucuses are defined within the DNC. It's a little bit different than Democrats abroad. And so we attend those meetings when we're at the meetings, and usually we'll have the chair of the DNC come around and speak to those meetings. So sometimes we'll be hearing the same pitch, maybe several times over and over again. The last time it was about, our results in November and how the red wave was really a trickle. But we'll have an opportunity to hear from the DNC chair, and sometimes there'll also be special guests and people who show up, and we'll say a word. So, for example, in the last meeting, the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan, came to the meeting, and she showed up at a lot of caucus meetings and said a few words. So it's an opportunity to meet those people. And in addition to caucuses, there are also councils of the DNC. So we participate in the Veterans and Military Families, Rural, Labor, Seniors, Disability, and a number of other councils at the DNC. So that's all the ground that we try to cover when we're at a DNC meeting. And we also try to make sure that we are connecting as much as possible our caucuses with the caucuses and councils at the DNC. So, for example, that we connect our Environmental and Climate Crisis Council with the corresponding council at the DNC, and that we also bring any questions that our caucuses have for the DNC caucuses. We bring those in, and we also take away from the DNC. For example, last September, when we knew abortion was going to be on the ballot in November, there was an excellent speaker, Celinda Lake, who spoke on how to message around the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and we brought her back into DA as a speaker in the Women's Caucus. So we get to meet some speakers that can be very, very useful for Democrats abroad also to interact with. So next slide. I just wanted to mention that since my term at the DNC, we also talk about the new DNC, which is a more democratic DNC, and some of the reforms that have taken place. And I'm going to share in the chat box in a moment a link to a document about that, because I don't want to go into a lot of detail at the moment about that. I'd rather kind of hear some questions, but I do want to share some links, and I'll put those in the chat when I get a chance. About some of the reforms that came in during the 2017 to 2021 period under Chair Tom Perez, to give the grassroots a bigger voice in the party. So it's interesting to see how we regrouped after the losses in 2016 and really strengthened the party. So I'll pop that link in there in a moment. Just wanted to mention that. And there's another reference here. Next slide. Oh, at the end, there's another slide with some more information for those who want to kind of dig more into the DNC. But the committees that our members participate on are listed here. So Candace is the co-chair of the Youth Caucus. Adrian is the secretary of the Midwest Caucus. Katie and I also both serve on the executive committees of caucuses, the Western Caucus in Katie's case, and myself on the LGBTQ caucus. And we were all elected in those roles. And I think that was really a recognition of the importance of Democrats abroad in being the margin of victory. There's, more and more demand for us to be able to participate in the caucuses and make sure that we are working more effectively. So, for example, there are asks that are made of us as Democrats abroad to be able to help with specific elections back in the United States, because they know that there's a whole electorate. There's those whole 6 million Americans who are probably not going to vote unless we proactively reach out to them. So more and more Democrats abroad is seen as an important part of the DNC, and we're finding more and more better ways that we can be sure that we connect and help get out the vote. So that's where we are in terms of committees. Next slide. And I think I mentioned this before, the real power at the DNC is in some of the main committees. This is actually listing who our current DNC members are. In addition to ourselves, Candace is a chair, is as chair, a member of the DNC, Adrian George, Joe Smallhoover, Ken Sherman, and John Baumlin are all of our
Why am I
DNC.
smaller type, Martha?
I don't know. I think that the bigger type is actually not fitting everything on the screen.
Not
so
taking
that-
it personally. I know I have a long name. That's right.
I think
Just
it's
kidding. Just kidding, Martha.
I think it's an issue with my, I don't use PowerPoint. I use a open source. Yeah, anyway, those are our DNC members. So
I
thanks.
think I skipped a slide and I don't know how to go back to it.
We'll just go on to the next one then.
Okay.
I think I had already covered that one.
Oh, wait, here we. Okay, this is the one I skipped.
Yeah, so people talk about the power of the DNC. And, as someone who gets to vote and ratify nominations and so forth in the DNC, there's certainly power there. But it's important to realize that a lot of the power in the DNC lies with the executive committee, also with some of the caucus chairs and council chairs, and then the staff. So just to mention those different aspects of the DNC. And then I think on the final slide, maybe that is the final slide.
Yeah, that seems to be the last one.
Okay, there's one last link that I'm going to put in the chat box for those of you who want a primer on the DNC, which is provided by Dems List, which is a really terrific resource. So I'm going to pop those into the chat box, and then I'm going to stop talking because I think I would love to hear any questions people have. That was really a bird's eye view. And, we do as DNC members, we do a post-DNC town hall and a pre-DNC town hall whenever we have a meeting. The post-DNC town hall for February is still to be scheduled, but that would be a call where we would go through everything that came up at the February meeting and answer questions around that. This is more of a informal chance for people to ask anything they'd ever wanted to know about the DNC.
Can I suggest we let Katie go first because I know she doesn't have a lot of time.
Absolutely.
Hey, Annie, thanks. I was just trying to find the chat box and type in either goodbye or hand up after initial questions. But I would be happy to jump in now before those questions, because as you can see, I'm at a market in Mexico City. Was double booked at this time, but wanted to make sure that I could join you for a little while. And me and Max, my son, who you might see there, need to leave for Frida Kahlo's house. We have an appointment there shortly, and it's nearby. But I wanted to add, Martha, first of all, thank you. Very comprehensive. Every time I look at those slides that we've put together, I realize there's a lot on there. And yeah, what I feel my job is as a DNC member. This is my second term. I've served from 13 to 17, not for 4 years, and now I'm in a 4-year term. There's so much education and re-education about DA that needs to happen with the national party and the state parties and the staff and the officers. And it's not just turnover. There is turnover. It's, I don't know what kind of amnesia, but every time we go to these meetings, we start from scratch a lot. And it is such a joy and it's such a pleasure to go and showcase your work, because that's what we do. We talk about the accomplishments of Democrats abroad. Some of them they know, some of the metrics they can look at, some of the elections that we know we have swung, they now know. I hope you know that President Biden thanked Candace Karastan, the leader of our delegation, in person at the White House when he met her. He said, thank you for Georgia and thank you for Arizona, because we know that overseas voters did that. Still, we have lots of people to talk to talk about Democrats abroad accomplishments and the issues that are important to us and the challenges that we face. 2 or 3 other points just really quickly. Another job that we have in the delegation is always, of course, to support our chair and our vice chair, Candace and Art, because they lead the delegation and they do a lot. They're in different groups that we're not in, but they do the negotiation on the behalf of Democrats abroad. And they have no staff until Jared joined. Thank God we have an ED now. So the rest of us kind of work as staff to support the chair and vice chair at the meetings and in between the meetings. And my goodness, they've done a great job. Thank you for that $300,000 the DNC gave us this year, really for the first time, and the commitment that they negotiated for the next cycle of 500,000 more. Of course, sometimes they tell us how to spend the money, but still, that is, you know, for a budget like ours, really important. So another job of ours is to make sure that the officers and the staff and other people know how we spend that money and how well spent it is. So that's another one of our jobs. And then I would just say, Martha mentioned one of the speakers that we got, that wonderful person for the Women's Caucus. We got Stacey Abrams out of a DNC meeting to come to Democrats Abroad. Nikema Williams, you know, who took John Lewis's seat. So every time there's a good speaker, at least one of us goes running down the hall chasing that person to make sure that we get their contact info and can bring them to our people and bring our people and our issues to them. Yeah, I think that's another little bit of a mouthful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. I'll stick around as I can for questions. And otherwise, you know how to reach us. I think Martha probably put the link in the chat. I couldn't see it, but aren't we just dnc@democratsabroad.org? What's our email address now? Martha, is that what it is? I think. Anyway, we'll
I have
make
to
sure that you get
confirm it. I will confirm and put it in the chat.
Yes,
Thanks,
it is.
Art. Thanks, Martha. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Lisa. I'm shutting my mic off now, and I'll stick with you as long as I can. Bye.
Thanks, Katie.
Hi.
Lisa, you're on mute.
Thanks for the Art. Yeah.
There were two hands up, Elizabeth and Steve. I don't know, you took your hands down, so I don't know if you still want to say something.
I was going to ask how long our reps are there, like what their term is. I heard from Katie that I think it's 4 years. So I'm glad to hear it's 4 years, because when you build those relationships and you have so few meetings in person, that you can at least leverage the connections, and hopefully you can repeat and whatever. But I'm really pleased to know that you're there for 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's from gavel to gavel, from the end of the previous Democratic National Convention to the end of the next one. That's our term. And we have term limits of 2 terms at the DNC.
Okay.
State parties don't have those kind of limits. They have people who serve for decades, which provides them a lot of continuity, but obviously not as much turnover and fresh faces and different perspectives. So that's how it works.
I think it's consecutive terms, right? 2 consecutive terms?
Correct.
Because I know we have a current one who's been on for more than 2 terms, if I'm not mistaken. Joe Smallhover from France, I think has been on. I don't know if this is his 3rd or 4th or something, but anyway.
It was
Yeah, and then there's Ken, of course. You know,
Yes,
he served as chair, vice chair, and now 2 terms as a member. And they were all in a row, weren't they?
Yeah.
They were, more or less.
Yeah, he's been on for 11 years now. Straight, but
That's
not
continuity.
elected, not elected. Yeah, I was gonna say, the ex officio members, the chair and the vice chair, of which I'm one, only serve for the 2 years that they are in those positions. So if they get reelected, then they're there for 4 years, but otherwise it's a 2-year term on the DNC. So
Okay.
And Ken is indeed our institutional memory and our continuity, having served over those 11
Right.
years, which we all rely on that a lot, on his
So,
expertise and experience. That's really been really
important
terrific.
to have that.
Again, pros and cons.
And I just remember from early days of Dems Abroad, when we hardly even had an executive for Dems Abroad, how little money we would get. So the fact that we're talking $305.5 million from the DNC from the early days, that's just unheard of in my memory.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's a testament to people going to the meetings, making sure that people understood. Candace has really pressed hard this last term, but I think it's a cumulative thing over the years.
well, and getting out the vote too, Art. I mean, we
Yeah,
didn't get
well,
out the vote.
getting out the vote and increasing that getting out the vote
Right.
over the last few election cycles. It's almost doubled in the last 2, doubled each cycle almost. So I think that's what really, proof in the pudding and all that stuff. Can I
I
just
think so.
ask-
I was part of those, the financial discussions we were having in the previous turn up till in 2019, actually. We were really hoping to get money from the DNC and it didn't come through. And the challenge there for us was to go out and prove we could do it ourselves, that we could raise money. And we raised $1 million in that cycle. And I think that also really proved to the DNC that we were a force to be reckoned with and that we could actually also do our own raise of money, and that we were worth investing in with our results.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
results.
You know, being around 20 years, I have to say too, thanks for the cumulative. It's not just the last 2 cycles. We have doubled or tripled our turnout every presidential year since 2004. Now, of course, those were really low numbers in 2004, but I mean, it's a longer process. And we needed to show that we were making a difference so that Biden knows and senators know. I mean, Al Franken's been telling us since he won the first time with 340 votes that it was us. We can list about 8 or 10 senators and that many Congress people over the years, but it just has been building and building and building. And of course, we've been getting better at showcasing the work that we do. So anyway, onward, 500,000 in the next cycle. Let's get it and spend it well.
Can I make one addition? Sorry, I'll be quick. I know we want to get to questions, but can I just make one addition to what we do? And this is because I was on the earlier call about the delegate selection plan. The DNC members do serve as delegates to the Democratic National Convention, as do all of the DNC members. They are automatic. There's another word for them. I can't remember what it is. They're automatic delegates to the convention. The one change is that in 2020, and I think this is already approved for 2024, that we're not eligible to vote in the first round of balloting. We're only, there was an agreement with part of the Unity Reform Commission that DNC members could only, or automatic delegates could only vote in the second round if it goes to a second round. And the other thing I was going to say, if you haven't looked at the delegate selection plan, please do. Maybe I can find the link for it, because it also describes how DNC members are elected by DA. So there are procedures in the delegate selection plan, not only for the election of regular delegates, but also the election of DNC members. So, which is part of it, and it has to be approved and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, and just to note, that's good that you mentioned that, Art, on the Unity Reform Commission. So those were historic reforms that were proposed at the 2016 election. And at the Chicago meeting of the DNC in 2018, I think it was, 2017 or 2018, the DNC members voted to take ourselves out of the first round of voting at the Democratic Convention. It was a really big deal. It was one of the recommendations of the Unity Reform Commission. It was very heated discussion. We actually had extra sessions that were planned. So we as a body, and some of them were closed to the press because we really needed to be very frank with each other about what it would mean for certain communities who had felt that they were and had been underrepresented in the party to take ourselves out of that first round of voting. So we actually did do that. And Democrats abroad, as DNC members, we met together on a number of occasions to align our position. And we were, for the most part, very solidly behind the reforms that were proposed out of the Unity Reform Commission and made that historic vote in Chicago to take ourselves out of the first round of voting so that there would be no appearance of having a thumb on the scale, basically, as automatic delegates. So that was those were reforms that were really quite historic. Thanks for mentioning that.
Okay, so do you hear me? I see that Andy has her hand up, but Steve, you had your hand up a while ago. I don't know if you still want to say anything or go to Annie.
Well, I was just going to ask, since we have, apparently in the other DNC members, there's quite a bit of continuity, and, we're a small contingent. In how likely is it that the DA, DNC members are going to move the needle in terms of getting some help on the issues that matter most to overseas Americans, like amending FACTA, changing to residency-based taxation. I mean, I think most of our fellow citizens back in the States aren't worried about these things and don't know what they mean, and just the impact that they have on our lives as overseas citizens. What do you think of our chances of moving the needle on those issues?
I don't know if Katie's on. She probably has a better memory of this but I think in 2015, the DNC actually passed a resolution about residence-based taxation. I think it was RBT. It might have been FATCA, it might have been both. But we did pass a resolution. The bigger question is, do resolutions passed at the DNC count for much? I think the bigger thing is that, you know, whatever officially the DNC does, it puts us in contact with the people who will be making decisions about some of these issues.
Art, can I jump in real fast?
sure.
My mic
Go
is
ahead.
live, and here we are, almost at Frida's house. Everybody, I was giving you the walk.
If you see
Um,
Selma Hayek there, let
we-
me know. Thanks.
We have passed a resolution at the DNC on residence-based taxation and on FATCA. Whether they have teeth or not, any resolution, frankly, we could go off on a big tangent here. I think and is it Steve, whoever asked that question, our biggest possibility, oh, that's Max, by the way, my son, I'll move the camera, he'd probably just like it, is elected officials. We need to elect officials that understand our issues and will fight for us. And the ones that are already elected, we need to get their attention and hold them accountable. So that's where we have possibilities. And we certainly have made strides in that direction, getting lots of co-sponsors on the Hill for various things that we want to do because of our lobbying on the Hill and our results in elections. So I think when it comes to really moving the needle on our issues, we get back to the core mission of Democrats Abroad. And that is turning out the vote and electing good people and then holding them accountable. So yeah,
But-
part of that is happening at the DNC, but a lot of that is happening in all the other work that we do. And with this, I think I have to go because we want to go get mine, don't we, Max?
Bye.
So,
Bye, adios.
I look forward to listening to this recording so I
Recording.
can see how this conversation goes. Thank you all for everything you've ever done for DA and everything you will. Bye.
But
Thanks for coming,
if I could
Katie.
jump in and just add to that, if you don't mind, I think Martha, I forget, but we had the chair of the DNC, Jamie Harrison, speak to members from Democrats Abroad in both Paris and London recently. Martha was there, and he heard a lot from our members about those issues, like residence-based taxation. And he took it on board and promised to bring it up with the people at the White House that he deals with on a regular basis. So I think there are a lot of, things don't happen automatically. We've been working on this for a long time, these issues for a long time, but each piece adds adds a piece to the puzzle in terms of getting what we want out of the.
Yeah, last thing for calendar.
We can't really hear you, Katie.
Can't hear.
Something we talked about a lot in Mexico. The new primary schedule. Goodbye.
Bye, Katie.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think, I think it's obviously a long haul with tax reform and what Art just mentioned, it's really about trying every different angle and possibility there. What I also want to say about the DNC is that these are open meetings. And my first exposure to the DNC was when a DNC member said to me, bring your issue to the DNC. And that was back in 2007. And I was just a DA member working on expanding the immigration law in the United States to include same-sex couples. And Connie Board said, bring your issue to the DNC. So Bob Rager and I just showed up, tried for many weeks to get ourselves on the agenda of one of the caucuses so we could raise our issue, only to discover that there actually was no agenda at the caucuses at that time. It was just a bunch of talking heads who would come in and give inspiring speeches, and then everyone would go away and have drinks afterwards. But it actually turned out to be a really good place to meet people. talking to the chief of staff of the chair of the DNC at that time, who said, yeah, this is an issue that we can really do something with. I remember also meeting with the chief of staff of Senator Baldwin, who said we want to hold hearings on the Hill about it. So there's a lot that can happen, in the corridors and, by just showing up at some of these meetings. I'm not sure that that's the place where we're really going to make the difference on tax reform. But I do want everyone to know that most of the DNC meetings are a few closed sessions. But most of those meetings are simply open to the public. And if you're in DC or if you're in St. Louis or wherever the meetings are being held, you can come. It used to be that you just could come and sign in. I think now there's an online registration form in advance. But it's pretty interesting, and there'll be a lot of formal sessions, but then also a lot of informal sessions in between. Like, for example, as we go into a presidential year, we're looking at, where's the convention going to be held? And they lobby us, even though we have absolutely no vote in where the convention is going to be held. But the different cities show up and representatives from those cities show up. Typically in a presidential year where we're going from a Republican, the second term of a Republican president, there'll be what's called the beauty contest. And that was what I got to witness in 2007, not expecting it. But all 15 candidates for president came and they all got to pitch themselves. They all got to play their theme music. They got to have a certain number of excited people with signs up on the stage. So, Obama was there, Clinton was there, but a lot of other candidates were there. And something similar happened in 2019 at the San Francisco meeting. All the candidates came and gave their story. So, those are the kind of things that happen at meetings, and they're very open to the public. And
so in 2019, even though you didn't have a vote in the first round, that's interesting.
They came to us. I mean, obviously we're influencers, right? We have our whole constituencies back in the states that we vote in. And of course we need those relationships because we're going to be holding primaries, right? In Democrats abroad, we're going to be holding primaries. We don't know how exactly that's going to go in 2024. Maybe we'll just have one candidate, maybe we'll have more. But in 2019, 2020, we needed to interact with all those different campaigns. And a lot of those candidates also had their own little sessions, Biden had one of his campaign people who was there, who held a session to talk about, Biden's campaign. And Pete Buttigieg had his husband there, and we all got to meet up. But that is very useful for us as Democrats abroad in terms of making relationships with those campaigns, so that we can go through all the process that we need to get through to let them be on our ballots. So that's just a taste of some of the things that happen at DNC meetings. But there's certainly, can be places to bring issues. I mean, it's not like that's where decisions are going to be made about the issues that we care about. But there's certainly places that you can make connections and have good conversations and take issues further afterwards.
Okay, I want to make sure Annie gets a chance to ask her question because you've been waiting patiently. And then Chris Riley, I see you want to participate, who's our chair, as you may know or not. Annie's the secretary, and Chris Riley, the chair of Democrats Abroad Barcelona. Okay, Annie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to trust that there's no such thing as a stupid question and ask this. Because yesterday I was on an informational session that was organized by Doris for people who are running for office here in Spain. And one of the questions about the DPCA members was if they have to all vote together, all the DPCA members from Spain, if they all have to vote in block. And so I would ask you the same question about at the DNC. Do all of the DA members vote the same way, or do you vote on your own conscience what you think is important?
We probably it's good if we both answer that, Art, because we might have different.
But we don't have to agree. That's the point.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, we're not.
What we say doesn't have to agree with each other. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't commit to vote as a block. I mean, we are elected individually to represent the regions that we represent and so forth. And I think because we're expected to be people who have good judgment and bring something to the questions that come to the DNC. But we do often discuss beforehand when we go to a meeting how we're going to vote. We consider different sides of questions. We talk about resolutions. I know in the February meeting, there was a resolution in support of young voters, and Candace asked us all to sign on to that as co-sponsors and support it. So, we discuss those questions in advance. But we don't necessarily coordinate it, and we certainly don't all vote the same way all the time. you know, we might vote all the same way, but we each bring our own, you know, perspectives to the questions. And I think especially
go
with
ahead.
resolutions, we bring our own backgrounds and things that we think are really important, where our voice can, you know, make a difference in terms of co-sponsoring resolutions. Go ahead, Art.
Oh, well, I was
Can I
gonna-
add to
mean,
that when you're finished, Art?
Sure. The reality is that most, you know, votes at the DNC or contested votes are pretty few and far between. Most of the decision making happens at the committee level, you know, whether it's a resolution, you know, they get voted on at the resolutions committee, which is where the debate usually happens. Once it gets through there, my limited experience, I've been on twice now on the DNC, is that not much gets debated and there aren't any close votes. The one close vote or the one contested vote that I remember, as Martha mentioned, was the 2017 election for the DNC chair, which was open because we didn't have a president in the White House and we were all allowed to vote. You know, I think all of the candidates spoke to the DA members, DNC members, and we didn't all vote together. I can't remember exactly. I know Ken and I voted for Keith Ellison on the first round, and Adrian voted for a woman named Jemu Green. She cast a half a vote, and everybody wondered what the hell's a half a vote at the DNC, because most people didn't realize that we only have half a vote. And so that kind of got people to understand that DNC members from DA only had half a vote. So that was kind of interesting. So, and then on the second round, we all voted for Tom Perez for one reason or another. So, but that's my memory of a contested vote, where we did not all vote in lockstep. So.
And Martha voted for Buttigieg, I think.
No, actually,
he withdrawn by then,
withdrew.
right?
He withdrew, just like moments before the vote.
And Jamie withdrew. Jamie withdrew as well, I think, just before the vote. Yeah. So.
Yeah, what I wanted to add to your question, Annie, is that while people are elected to use their brains and their hearts and their gut to make decisions and vote, there is also something to be said as a DPCA voting rep or as a DNC member about the power of voting as a bloc. So I'm sure Spain will be asked by candidates, you know, to bring along as many votes as they can. And we were, in that 2017 presidential election, we were asked to deliver all the Democrats abroad votes that we could by all the candidates. And it leads to different kinds of conversations that you have than you do as individuals. And we did tell Tom Perez that we did think we could deliver almost all of the votes for him in the second round. And they ran to us immediately after the first round. We were one of the groups they came to saying, okay, now we need you. Now's the time to step up. So it is a combination of things, Annie. It's not purely one or the other, but certainly it's not people voting in either of those situations in lockstep.
But I did want to go back.
Blue House over there.
In that respect, going back to Steve's question, you know, do we really, you know, have, you know, in total, we only have 4 votes, 8 times 1/2. We're probably the same size delegation, well, with the same vote numbers as I think half of the other state parties. A lot of them have 4 votes. But again, it's not the vote really that makes the difference, you know, in terms of, you know, moving forward on things, except in the, you know, this limited case where we were electing a chair. But generally, the number of votes doesn't really influence what actually happens. Again, it's, you know, as Martha said, we've got the 8 members so that we can reach out and talk to as many people as possible. Because as she said, we are unique in that, you know, Indiana deals with Indiana. They don't really have that much to do with voting in California or everywhere else, but we do, you know, and we are unique in that respect. Even the territories don't operate that way. Although a little known fact, Northern Marianas is the only other place where if you lived in the US and you now live in the Northern Marianas, you can still vote in the place that you lived in the US. little known fact. All the other territories, you have to vote in the territory. Sorry, just a little tidbit that I picked up at a DNC meeting. So
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Chris Riley.
oh yeah.
Do you remember?
Thank you. Firstly, thanks all of you for everything that you've been doing for Democrats Abroad. My question actually very, very prosaic, and it may have been answered right at the beginning of the presentation because I was not on the call for the first 10 minutes. But anyway, I assume that you have to go physically to these meetings in the US. So it's a pretty enormous time commitment. Is it for a year? And then who Art just made an expression which to us Anglo guys looks like money. Who covers the cost of all the flying and the hotels and all that stuff? I'm just interested to know because it's a pretty massive commitment that I think anyone who would have an interest in running for a position on the DNC part of Democrats Abroad, they might think twice about.
Well, the DNC meetings, there are 2 a year. For the chair and vice chair, there's also something called the Association of State Democratic Committee, which also meets twice a year. Well, actually it meets 4 times a year, but 2 of those meetings are usually together with the DNC meetings, and those are for the chair and vice chair. So yeah, it's something to think about, and it's something that we, on the executive committee should think about in terms of, a travel fund for people so that, and I think it's something we've thought about and discussed in the past. And, as we do for our annual meeting, we have a travel fund. It's definitely something, that we should think about both in terms of time and money.
So the DNC,
The answer to the question is that we pay ourselves.
Okay.
I think the other part of it is that we often don't get a lot of advance notice when the meetings are. An exception now is that we've already heard in February that we have a meeting in October. So that makes it possible to get a cheaper ticket and to coordinate it with family visits and other kinds of things like that. Yeah. But we usually just get a couple of months notice, and indeed we pay ourselves. We often try to find homestays or share hotel rooms or things like that. But it's
I would.
Yeah, Chris, if I could jump in, it can be done cheaply, Chris. It can be done real cheaply. Of course, more advance notice for tickets, but nowadays, if you are, if you're persistent, you can get a relatively inexpensive ticket, and you can sleep on couches. Share rooms. Don't stay in the conference hotel. It's always more expensive. Although then you need to be there a lot, networking. I love to go to the gym early in the morning. You get all kinds of folks riding the bike at 6 a.m. But we have talked a lot about whether we should have a travel fund. And we certainly shouldn't make this a position that only people can fill that can afford to do international travel twice a year. We need to fix that. And the DNC actually has talked to us about helping to fund.
Yeah,
On the other hand, we don't want to make it junkets either for 8 people. So there's lots of gray area in there in which we need to work in the middle.
Yeah, because
I was going to say, sorry, if I could just jump in. Per the DNC, they did agree to provide funding to the territories so that people could attend meetings. People coming from Guam or American Samoa, which is, maybe even more costly than for many of us. They put $50,000, I was about to say euros, but dollars, for the travel of those members to DNC meetings. So it may be that we get something like that in the future. So.
Yeah, so I mean, so if let's say I got offered a new job back in New York and went back to New York, and I just got elected into the to be a DNC rep for Democrats Abroad. I know, sounds pretty far-fetched right there. But if I had, would I still be allowed under our rules to be a DNC rep for Democrats Abroad?
I think if you gave up your residence in beautiful Barcelona, you would not be. eligible.
Yeah,
And
that's
just so we're clear, we had somebody who was elected to be well, Katie won't let me say represent, but elected by the AP region as a resident of the AP region, who ended up not relocating to the AP region as he had planned to, and resigned. And that's why we have John Baumlin now as the AP, as a person from the AP who's on the DNC. So.
okay. Thanks. And again, thank you all very much for what you do.
So Chris, I thought you were about to offer us your place in New York in case the convention is going to be held in New York and 8 or 10 of us could sleep on your floor. But let's just think about that.
Yeah, well,
in New York City.
Yeah, it's not that big.
Well, I have a question about when that follow-up meeting is going to be, more or less, so we can plan on attending, because I attended the
pre-meeting.
Pre-meeting, the town hall, and
Yeah.
I'm eager to hear how it turned out.
Sure.
Especially the question that I raised.
I think one of the various reasons, but anyway, I think we wanted to get the DSP town halls out of the way. So I would expect, let's see, when are they finished? DSP is probably shortly after the April 5th. And that's something we'll be discussing with the DNC members, Martha, Katie, be on the alert. I should have sent you an email today, but did not. So
it would be great to get that scheduled, because Katie also put in the chat, what about some of the exciting and hot topics that were discussed in February, which was around the
primary schedule.
Primary schedule, exactly, which I don't think that we'd probably need quite a bit of time to go into that in more detail here, but that was certainly a really important topic that we talked about in the business meeting. And there were changes made that hadn't been made in a very long time in the Democratic Party in terms of the order of our primaries. And of course, there were states that were very happy with the outcome and states that were not at all happy with the outcome. So that's
Iowa in particular.
But what was really cool was the thoughtful, considered, public, inclusive process, which took months. It didn't just happen in the room at the time, but in the room at the time we voted, there was really vigorous, passionate, spirited debate on both sides, respectful. It's worth listening to. And we came to a good decision. But I love that debate on the floor. Iowa and New Hampshire started, and I was almost swayed because it was compelling, the reasons they wanted to keep it the same way. I'm sure we'll point this out at the town hall, but really worth listening to that part of the DNC meeting. I thought it was amazing to listen to Nikema Williams and Debbie Dinkle from Michigan and those that were fighting for the change. And then we made a big change in a big way. Yeah, but more at the town hall meeting, Art, jumping the gun on you there, sorry. But I mean, you're hearing about the results, of course, but the back end of it, I think, is also really inspiring.
Yeah, I just think it'd be nice, so you don't have to also repeat it so many times, whoever is interested. I mean, this is basically for Spain, anyone else could join, but it was, I don't know if there's anybody here that was not from Spain. I can't identify that. Okay, so Chris had one more question, and then maybe we can end because it's an hour.
Yeah, sorry everyone. This is just a very fast question. There was some mention of resolutions at DNC, and obviously in the DPCA meetings that we have coming up, people do put forth resolutions. Those resolutions, do they go from you guys into the DNC? I don't understand. If we have a resolution that goes into the DPCA, how does it sort of meander its way through to the US for consideration?
Yeah, it's not an automatic process. Our resolutions are our own resolutions. And if we wanted to bring something forward to the DNC, that would be a whole other process. There's, similar deadlines in terms of bringing resolutions forward, similar considerations, whether they're relevant for that body, whether they're going to move forward, because they're actually discussed first in a committee that decides which ones to advance and which ones not to. I think one of the important things to say about resolutions is even if the resolution doesn't pass, They really are ways to signal issues that are really important inside of the electorate and inside of the body. So for example, we've had resolutions recently around dark money, and one resolution around that topic did pass, but it wasn't the original resolution that had been submitted by the DNC member. But it did really raise the issue of like, how do we address how do we as a party address what the behavior of candidates? And it's not the DNC that's regulating candidate behavior. There's other mechanisms for that, but obviously it's an issue that we care about really deeply is, the dark money that is such an, has such a huge impact on our election. So it signals issues and it creates discussion, which I think is really important in democratic processes. But if we had a DPCA resolution that we wanted to go to the DNC, I mean, that would certainly be a route that could be pursued, but it's not an automatic connection.
Okay, so it would have to
We
be
had
a
one 2
resolution.
meetings ago. We had one 2 meetings ago for the reparation, put by the reparations task force. And it did pass, so,
Thank you.
sure.
I'm getting really eager to see the inside of Frida Kahlo's house, actually, as I see Katie standing
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
I don't know.
Is it the one in the movie?
Always wanted to go.
Can some of us say thank you and goodbye while you wait for the tour?
Can
You
that
know,
include
we-
me?
We worked really closely with Antar Keith on that reparations. Of course, it came from our own resolution and we submitted it. They wanted changes. We brought Antar in the negotiations. So it was definitely like teamwork, but it had to be initiated by one of us and not by Antar. He had no standing. He has no standing at the DNC. Of course, we 8 are really willing to work with anybody in Democrats Abroad who wants to push forward an issue that has been voted on by the DPCA as being something we're all concerned about. So I hope that helps to answer like the specifics of Chris's question. And I want to turn the corner and show you the front of the house, which is wild, but it can't move away from Max's phone, which is giving me internet, and he has the tickets on the phone. Can I? He says, come back. I'm going to try to show you the front of the house and I'll mute in the meantime.
So any other questions or thoughts or anything for us to take away as DNC members?
I have a question if nobody else does, and if I've already gone once. Do you have any feeling how people in the states back in the US feel about our state team initiative? And is there any opportunity for the state teams to work with those people to increase communication? Is it something that they see as beneficial to help driving out the vote overseas?
Yeah,
I think
so. I know you're from Wisconsin, right, Annie? Yeah. So I think, working with Ben Wickler and the other people, at the state party, I think, this is something that we have conveyed to people, that this is, the setup for, battleground states. And, I think they're certainly willing to help with this. I was gonna, earlier I was gonna say, Martha mentioned the regional conferences, and that each one of us is a member of a regional conference. For whatever reason, I'm in the Southern Conference. My only connection there is I'm a Kentucky colonel, believe it or not, with the white coat and all that, like Colonel Sanders. But that's a very good place to connect with the people from the state parties. I mean, we do it as well at the, Candace and I at the Associative State Democratic Committees, which is the chairs and vice chairs of all the parties. But even within the DNC format, one, we hear about what they're doing, because I think it's probably the same way in the Western Caucus, but I know in the Southern, we all get up and say what we're doing and what we're involved in and what our priorities are. And it's a real good way to, one, for us to spread the word about what we're doing and the state teams. Trying to remember, we have a battle, Georgia, I guess the Georgia team is in the South. So that's a good way to connect and, certainly bring them together. I mean, they're looking to get out the vote, same as we are. So the more we can do that, the they'd be delighted, I think, to work
Yeah,
with.
I've also
And
had really positive response from the state. I mean, when we tell them that we're actually want to work down ballot, that's very exciting. I mean, we have to figure out really how we're going to do that, because our timing for getting ballots 45 days out, there's still not always a lot of the debates that have taken place and information, and the state parties don't necessarily have, you know, accessible sites we can go to learn about down ballot candidates. So it's work in progress. But I think the state parties are really pleased when they hear that we're, you know, looking down ballot, and that we're organizing around states.
Yeah. So Annie, getting back to your question, you know, the call that we had with Chair Harrison a couple days ago, a week ago, Ben Wickler, the Wisconsin state chair, was on the call, and he publicly thanked us for our efforts. Both the Wisconsin state team, he didn't name you by name, and our GOTV team, but he does know what we're doing, partially because I direct messaged him during his presentation, reminding him about how we're reaching not only all of our members around the world that vote in Wisconsin, but people from the voter list that he gave us. So definitely Wisconsin knows, Arizona knows, that's the state that I'm in and where I've been a lot. But it's uneven across Democrats abroad. It's uneven the level of activity from our state parties. And it's uneven what state parties are really know enough about us to be keen to work with us. Definitely tons of potential in this area. And it's one of the places where we need to be collaborating and coordinating, and we can help them and they can help us. And when they help us, then we'll help them more. And I think they're beginning to learn that. We had a number of candidates across all of the swing states that spoke at DA events, not just federal. We had state and local candidates. We put those candidates in front of our members to help them learn how important it is to vote down ballot. And for some of them, what they need to do to be able to get that full ballot. Some of you may have been on with Adrian Fontes a couple of times. He's the Secretary of State in Arizona. He kept asking Arizona voters to find just that much intent in their hearts so they could click the box and get a full ballot. You know, and this leads us to, sorry, a little bit of a ramble, but to very important work for us to do in this off year. And that is to change legislation and change rules where we can, so that more people can get a full ballot like we did in New Jersey, and so that more voters can send their voted ballots back electronically. We've got 22 states that have both of those problems. And this is the time for us to work with elected officials in those states, voting officials, and the state parties to try to get things changed as we can. And we're busy in New York and Maryland and Arizona right now trying to make that happen. So good point that we should be involving DNC members from those states as we can, as well as state party people that, you know, that care about these things. Thanks. Thanks for that question.
Okay. How are we doing, Annie? Is it time to wrap it up? Okay, well, look, I think it falls to me as the, well, soon to be ex-chair of Democrats Abroad Barcelona, to say thank you so much to Annie and to Lisa for helping to put this thing together. You know, it's a shame we didn't get hundreds of people showing, but we had a good old turnout. And, you know, to Annie, I'm so glad that you're taking up the caucus challenge, because, you know, you've been the heart and the lungs of everything we've done in Spain for the last 4 years. It's been incredible. And I think the rest of DA around the world are going to see just how bloody fantastic you are at keeping everything moving along. So I really appreciate you pulling all this. And thanks to Martha and to Art and to Katie for joining as guests. Thank you. Thank you. I think that is the end of the meeting. Adios.
By the way, I did just put the link to the delegate selection plan. If those of you haven't seen it,
Yep.
it's worth looking at. Comment if you have an opportunity. We're in a 30-day comment period. And it's good to see Carl. We've now met online in Belgrade and
Great to see
Munich
everybody.
and Munich and everywhere else. So, and here.
Yeah.